Hello, everybody. We're going to be talking today about something that sounds really esoteric, really confusing, vocabulary reduction. How do we go to vocabulary reduction? How do we reduce our vocabulary? Are we talking about see, spot, run? What does this mean? It really is about something that we do every time we do analysis, whether we do music analysis or textual analysis, or we're trying to think about, what really happened on that last phone conversation I had with, my partner or friend or something like that. We're trying to reduce the number of complexities down to something smaller and more manageable. And one of the places where we do vocabulary reduction quite a bit is in Roman numeral analysis. We don't label everything a Roman numeral. We tend to label the things, depending on who your teacher was, maybe she or he said, we only label things that are really chords. What does that mean? When we're thinking about how we do this as humans, we don't really have to think too much about how we do this. We just have to get better at doing this. But if we're going to train a computer system to be able to tell us only the things that are really there, to reduce the vocabulary of a score into something more manageable, then we're going to have to understand this process quite a bit better. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to move over to the Jupyter notebook, and today I didn't have time to make every single thing a little bit really polished. So you'll get kind of a sense of how I program, how I make up assignments for us, and how some of the wrong turns that happen along the way. You might want to watch this video at 1.5 times speed if all these false turns are a little bit confusing, but maybe it'll be useful. So let's go over to Jupyter.
Okay, we're going to start by importing from Music 21 the corpus method, and let's load up a piece by Clara Schumann, her piano trio, slow movement, one of my favorite pieces. And we've looked at this once in class before, and it's going to take a little bit of time. It's a little bit of a slower thing. You might need to wait here. Okay, it's a piano trio, but it begins with just the piano part. It's really lovely section. Let me find a YouTube video and place that in here. And you can click on that or just Google it and find it in there. Anyhow, the next 8 measures we looked at once in class, and we can see it. It's when the violin and the cello enter and the piano switches to something else. The violin's playing the same melody. We looked at it because of those grace notes. I'm not sure if we can highlight that there. There we go. And they and they were a problem for some of our representations of encodings. Okay, so let's just extract the piano part from here, and you can see some of the mistakes that I've made with my own Music 21 package. This happens. I'm like, oh, I want to extract 2 parts. Well, first off, that should be 2 to 4 anyhow. But in any case, it's giving me a list of things. So I've made 2 mistakes. That's not giving me a stream. It's giving me a list. I'm going to go ahead and try creating a stream from that. And here, this is actually going to work, but because I did 2 to 3 instead of 2 to 4, I only got 1 part. And I actually thought what I was doing was appending the left hand after the right hand. In any case, that's probably not the best approach. So let's go ahead and do this exactly. Do this in another way. We'll just take. Let's see, I'm trying to delete the evidence. This isn't a high biology experiment. I'm allowed to do that. I'm a little bit frustrated thinking on my head. Okay, now I'm going to do this again. I'm going to import the stream. We're going to create a new score, not part, for putting things in. And we're going to put in, gosh, I cannot type piano after all these years. We're going to put in part 2, which is the piano right hand, and we're going to also put in part 1, which is the piano left hand. And in order to make this run faster, we'll just take the first 16 measures. I put measure 0 just out of habit in case there's a pickup measure. There isn't in this case, so I could have really started with 1. Now we're going to look at just that little excerpt, just the piano part, all that to get rid of some empty rests, but that's kind of okay here. Okay, so we're going to play with just creating the chords of this, and we'll remember the chordify function, which is kind of a fun part of Music 21, and we'll show it. And because we're taking a treble clef and a bass clef put together in instruments, this is always a little bit wacky. You kind of get used to counting obscene numbers of ledger lines when you are playing with chordify, and there was times in my life when I could actually eyeball that first note and say, yep, that's a G, I got it. But those times have passed. So instead we're going to recurse, go through every single element in every measure and everything, and get all the chords from that. C chords is now a part, and we're going to take every one of those chords, which we call C, and put it into closed position and say that it's going to be in octave 4. And in place equals true, we're going to replace the old chord, and now we're going to show that the same thing, and now things look quite a bit better. So yep, there's a thing we compare back up. Can we kind of look at the same page? Yeah, a little bit. Yep, that's a D down there. That's a G. Okay, so it worked pretty well. Okay, we'll zoom back in again so that we can see. Great. Now what we're going to do is we want to label everything that's happening in this. So first we're going to analyze the key. What key are we in? We're in G major. Yep. You'll see that this is called the piano trio in G minor, but this movement is in G major. Great. So we're going to iterate over every one of these chords again, and we're going to create a Roman numeral for each of the chords. Actually, we're going to import the Roman package from Roman module from Music 21. And there's this cool thing that you wish you had in your last time you were programming your last problem set, Roman numeral from chord. So we're going to take the chord and say that we want the Roman numeral in G. We're actually going to create an object called G underscore major, which is a variable, which is the key of G object. And the reason for this is otherwise we'd have to create a new key object for every chord, and over time that becomes slow. So what we'll say is for our original chords, we'll give them the lyrics, which are equal to the figure of the Roman numeral. So whatever the Roman numeral is, we'll assign that to the lyric. You can see it's not the fastest thing in the world, but now you can have it and we can look in. We can look at those odd chords in a little bit. You can go ahead and pause the video if you want to look at them in more detail, have a nice laugh. But I'm just going to just get a quick excerpt, the first 4 measures, that first line there, just so that we can compare without having to move our eyes up and down a lot. So now we'll compare this to the original piano part with the left and the right hands and just see, do these chords look about right? Okay, yep, see, there's that weird thing that second chord isn't really a 6/4 chord. It's really that low G is still sustaining. And then is that a 4 chord or is that a 5/4/2 chord? It's going to be a little bit difficult because we want to make sure, is that a appoggiatura or is that a chord tone? It's a little bit difficult. In fact, this would be the challenge problem, to be able to take something where we have arpeggios, melodies, things, and do vocabulary reduction on a piano part like this. This is still one of the big unsolved problems in the field, and being able to make progress on how do we reduce the number of chords of Roman numerals of analytical things to only the quote-unquote real chords on a complex score, on an orchestral or a piano score, is still one thing that you could get, an A++, you could get complete published paper out of being able to do that. For now, we're going to, and there's some great ways to do that. We'll be looking at a dissertation by a guy by the name of Christopher William Wright at some point for people who are very interested in such things. But we can go and do something a little bit easier if we stick to chorale style compositions. So we'll go back to our favorite Bach piece, BWV 66.6, which is going to have its own problems in a little bit, but we're going to chordify it. I'm just going to cut and pasting up here, and we're going to, again, once we chordify everything, put it into closed position, put it into octave 4, and again, replace all the chords in place. If you haven't seen how this technique works, look at Music 21 User's Guide, Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. We do that a lot there. In fact, with this piece, so you'll see some new techniques and be able to do it a little bit more slowly. So this piece has the interesting characteristic that it ends in a different key than where it began. So if we look at the key of measures 0 to 2 using Carol Krumhunsel's probe tone key analysis method, which is built into Music 21, and we see that it's an A major. But then if we look at the last 7 measures, 4 through 10, we see it's an F sharp minor. So we're going to work on each of the 2 parts separately. So let's first look at measures 0 to 2 and get this excerpt as B chords underscore excerpt. Should probably have called it excerpt 1, but whatever. And we can look at those first 2 measures. And let's use the same technique that we used with Clara Schumann to go through each chord and get a Roman numeral from it and then put the lyrics in so we can see it. We just have to change G major to A major. Again, you can just put the string A there, but I kind of prefer to do this. So we'll do A major and got to change C chords to B chords excerpt. And of course, A maj is not the same as A major. So I'll go ahead and fix that. Put that in, and now we'll take this excerpt and show it. And we can see, okay, it's quite a bit simpler. We have the 1, 5, 6, 6, yeah, things like that. This is actually a really good time to remember, think about references, because we haven't really talked about this. So this is just the excerpt of just the 2 measures. When we go back and look at all of the chords, one of the things you can see is that the figures do sustain back to that part. In other words, the chords in the excerpt are the exact same objects as the chords in the chordify part. So what you change on one of them will change on the other. But if we go all the way back to the original Bach part and we show it, we'll see that, hey, there's no lyrics anywhere, anything, because there were no chords there. And we just can't sort of get back to that. Anyhow, that was a little bit of a digression while we look at the Roman numerals here. Whew, these look like the kinds of Roman numerals I was taught, so there's not too much to do there. So let's go back to the second Bach excerpt, the one that's in F sharp minor and measures 4 through 10. So we'll go ahead and get measures 4 through 10, and we'll call that Bach excerpt, B chords excerpt 2 and measures 4 through 10. When we show this part, you're going to see that there's one problem with all of our showing things, and that is to say that the measure numbers are not going to be kept, but whatever. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create a key of F sharp minor and pause this for 1 second in the video to see that when we make a key object, really important to make a lowercase f if you want to show that something's minor. And I call it fis, by the way, because you can't obviously put f number sign, pound sign, to mean a sharp sign as a variable, because it would just be a common. So we sometimes borrow things from other languages, and so fis is the German for F sharp. Okay, so getting back here, we're just doing the same thing that we did before. B chords excerpt 2, we're getting each of the chords, changing them to Roman numerals, taking that Roman numerals figure and make it into lyrics, and now we're going to show that section. And these measure numbers are the thing I was talking about, that I guess we have to add 3 to each one of them to get what it is. Eventually, we'll be able to contribute back to open source projects like MuseScore and be able to fix this limitation. Haven't had time to do that yet. Such a great project. Anyhow, so we can go look through and see that, okay, this time there's a lot more interesting chords and some things that definitely we want to reduce the vocabulary of, because I don't think all of those chords actually exist. Let's just grab that last measure of the second system here, which is measure 8, and look into that over here. Yep, so there's an A sharp and then a B and a C sharp in the bass. Yep, that's definitely the right measure. And you can see that chord, quote unquote, on the second eighth note is almost certainly not a chord. That is a passing tone, right? And so that flat augmented chord on 6/6 or something, whatever that was, that's something we want to reduce in the vocabulary. So how can we do this? I'm going to give you one quick way that we can do this. Let's just excerpt measure 8, call it M8, and just get that one measure from this is from the chordified version, measure 8, and we can just show it, make sure we got the right one. Always do this, by the way. The number of times that somebody has worked hours and hours and can't figure out the bug because it turns out that wasn't the right bug, that wasn't the right measure. So yeah, I'm going to pause the video for 1 second and go through those chords in some detail. So sorry I've cut off the soprano, but it's just a whole bunch of F sharps. So we can see that the first chord, 1/6, I mean, that's really from the bass. That's the chord that's happening. It's either the chord on beat 1 or the chord on beat 2. So the third beat, the bass line looks like it's doing some kind of a passing tone, and then it's moving up to that C sharp at the end. So something is happening, but well, it's really unclear if anything except the first beat is something that we'd want to keep as an actual chord. Especially looking at the alto line, looks like it has both of those Ds might be passing tones, and the tenor also looks like it's passing tones. So a lot of these chordal motions are things that are introducing interesting elements, but are they introducing new chords? So what we're going to do in the next section is let's just get a way of saying which chords do we think have enough stability for us to label them. So we're going to look through each chord in measure 8. In this case, I don't need to do recurse because measure 8 only has chords and time signatures maybe or something like that. And I'm going to print whether or not the chord is consonant. That's a routine, a method that's on every chord object, and then print the chord object itself. We can see that only that first 1/6 chord is actually a consonant chord. Everything else is dissonant according to the rules of tonal harmony. So what we could do is we could create a new stream and start putting all of the chords in, and then let's replace that back into our original, or we can start copying things and putting them in. But after thinking aloud at the keyboard for a little bit, I decided I was going to just go through and let's just remove all the chords that are not consonant. So every stream has a nice little remove functionality from it. There are some problems, by the way, just like all Python and many other languages, lists and arrays and stuff like that, that if you remove things while you're iterating over, there could be problems. But here it's okay. So we're going to remove every chord that's not consonant. And then we're going to get that first chord, the 1/6 chord, and we'll make the duration of that be a whole note. So now when we look at measure 8, we see only that consonant chord. Ta-da! And that's one of the forms of vocabulary reduction that's going to be pretty common. So when we go back and look at the excerpt, here, for the first part, we don't have nearly as much to remove. So maybe we want to do the same type of thing. Well, let's just look at that first excerpt and see what things are consonant, what things are dissonant, and here we do need the recurse. So we're going to look at this first excerpt and see, wow, almost everything here is consonant. There's that one false. Which one's it refer to? What's it refer to? Oh, let's just replace that and print the figure instead, not the figure, the lyrics instead, and see that that one thing that is not consonant is a 5-7 chord, something that we might want to keep, whereas the something else that is consonant is a 3-6 chord, which we might want to remove and say, well, that's not a real chord. In this case, it is because we're about to be modulating into another key. So we're going to be thinking about how can we do these things, what are the various criteria that we can find, and how do we do this? These are big questions, but they're really valuable, important ones. So in this week's problem set, we're going to try to make advances in the field of vocabulary reduction, specifically in trying to remove elements that, while beautiful, might be considered decorative and not part of the main harmony from the chorale repertory. In the Dropbox, you will find an IPython notebook that explains the problem set in more details. This is moving toward the types of work, the types of independent work that you'll be doing in the final research project. So just like the last problem set asked you, use your own imagination and move forward in some way toward the understanding of computational musicology or computational music analysis. This problem set is very open-ended. I'm asking you to spend 3 to 6 hours, and I'm putting a limit on that because I don't want this to feel like something that takes up your entire night, your entire weekend. It could. I mean, you really could spend 60 hours, 100 hours. You could spend as much time, a lifetime, on this problem. But I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to knock yourself out. I want you to just think something about some interesting ways to reduce the number of chords in a Bach chorale by removing non-harmonic tones, such as passing or neighbor tones or suspensions, or dissonant chords, or anything you would like. You do not need to get everything right. You do not need to have your solution work on every chorale. I'm just asking for some work toward a solution, and I'm going to be asking that we're going to be willing to share our solutions with each other, or at least let me share them, I guess, the Thursday after we all get back. So you might start by identifying all the dissonances in the video and removing those that don't make sense, or jumping back to particular places between the reduction and the original. Your solution does not have to be fast, and I'm going to suggest that you do it in your own editor. You don't, this is too big of a problem to try to solve with an IPython notebook. One of the things we've been practicing all semester is writing good documentation and practicing good software engineering. So don't put everything into this one function I'm going to give you called vocabulary reduce. Instead, I want you to be making your own functions, and each of them should be documented. And you should probably be testing them individually as well. I've given you a list of 4 Bach chorales that I think are easier to work with than our classic BWV 66.6. I've also given you a slightly modified version of the code in the video that so you can analyze it and you don't need to go back through the video to get every letter right or something. And it goes through and chordifies, does the key analysis, puts everything in closed position, creates Roman numerals, and then assigns the figure of the Roman numeral to the lyrics. Note that you might want to keep that Roman numeral object around, that Rn object, because there are certain things that we can do with a Roman numeral that you might find very valuable. So go ahead and take the time to read the Music 21 User's Guide. It's module reference on working with Roman numerals. You may work on this problem set by yourself or in groups of 2. If you work on a group with somebody else, I'm not going to expect double the amount of work. That's a little bit harder when you're just starting a collaboration. Usually these take a little bit of time to ramp up, but a little bit more than what one person could do by themselves. You may also speak with other people in collaborator mode, but still turn in your own work. I'm really excited. This is the moment when I start getting back a lot of things from the class itself. This is why I love teaching this class. So I can see what kinds of creativity are going to go into this particular assignment. If you have any questions, I will have office hours right after class on Thursday for the first 30 minutes in a group setting, and then after that, individual by appointment. Super excited. I'll see you on Thursday. Thanks.